Welcome to worship and happy Mother's Day. Now, that can mean a lot of different things to each one of us. Let us start out by saying that today is a day when we see and appreciate those who mother and have mothered. We see and appreciate those who have helped to guide us and shape our ways. We see and appreciate those who add their life energy to make something happen for someone else or someplace else. We see and acknowledge the feelings we bring to this day, as varied as they may be, and we remember those who mother who are no longer with us. As we hold all of these and more, we reach out to one another as we celebrate this Mother's Day. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. I'm Bill, your worship associate today. As you can see, I'm joining you from my most sacred of spaces, my kitchen. If this is your first time here, we're so glad you've come. This is a welcoming congregation, and we are always working on how to better welcome and care for one another. Whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. As we begin, we want to acknowledge that this church occupies land in Huchen, the unceded territory of the Chichenyo-speaking Ohlone people. We understand that we continue to benefit from the seizure and occupation of this land. We acknowledge and embrace our responsibility to take restorative action. We affirm that this is a deeply felt and commit our congregation to be in the right relationship with Indigenous communities, aligning in solidarity, supporting Indigenous projects, and caring properly for the land. For more information, please visit uucb.org/indigenous. On a personal note, if you do not participate in last Sunday's personal theology seminar with Karina Gould, I highly recommend you listen to the recording when it's posted to the website. I was on the fence before, but not anymore. I support this, and I encourage you to as well. Please take a moment to prepare your space. Make sure you have a candle and a way to light it so you can join us from home. Now, let us kindle our candles, or the inner flame in our hearts, with the words of Denise Crowley. This chalice is lit for those who illuminate our paths, to ignite gratitude for gifts shared generously. We witness the resilience of mamas and maternal figures. Our gratitude extends to the goddesses who cradle us in the darkest night, sparking our fierce feminine energy, guiding us to be audacious warriors for justice. I invite you now to share in the comments where you are by writing "I carry the flame" in whatever town or city you're joining us from. While we're typing, I would like to share a thought with y'all that you can contemplate or not. This is something that I've been struggling to pin down, and I would appreciate some input. If a chalice is a convex shape, theoretically capable of holding liquid, which we have replaced with something flammable, such as like a candle or oil, then is a barbecue a chalice? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Just something to think about. And now, please join us in singing our opening song, "Come Sing a Song with Me." The words will be on the screen.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Please join me in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
Dear Happy Mother's Day. I'm the Reverend Catherine Boyle. My pronouns are she, hers, hers. I'm the Director of Family Ministry here at UUCB, and this is the Time for All Ages. Let us begin. This is the story of the possum and her mom. Once there was a young possum who lived in a shoebox in an alleyway. Her only neighbor and friend was a cranky raccoon who lived on top of a dumpster. One day across the street in the park, she saw other possums playing with their mother. "Oh," she said, "I wish I had a mother. I'd ride on her back, I'd drink her milk, I'd cuddle up beside her at bedtime," the possum said. "Ha!" the raccoon said. "Don't look at me, kid. And don't look at those animals, those strange animals across the street. They won't take you either." "Strange," said Possum, "but they have 4 paws, just like me." "Plenty of animals do," replied Raccoon. "And a long tail," said Possum. "Plenty of animals do," insisted Raccoon. "You know, little Possum," continued Raccoon, "those aren't possums. Those are kittens, and their mother is a cat. If you want a mother, you should at least start with your own species." Well, the next day, the possum saw another mother possum with a line of 3 possums following behind her. They scurried all in a row on their 4 pink feet with their pink tails hanging proudly behind them. Their fur was gray and shiny, and their nails clacked on the sidewalk. "Raccoon!" Possum cried. "Look, the mom and her babies." "Possum!" said Raccoon. "Those aren't possums." But, said Possum, "they have 4 claws." "Plenty of animals do," insisted Raccoon. "And a long tail," said Possum. "Plenty of animals do." "Well, what are they?" asked Possum. "They're rats. Now, Possum, I tell you what I told you before. Your mother needs to be from your own species. Not a cat, not a rat, not even a raccoon. A possum." That night, Possum curled up in her shoebox. Raccoon really cared about her mother being a possum. But truthfully, rat, cat, or even bat, it would not matter to Possum what species her mother was. For it wasn't what a mother was, but what a mother did that mattered to Possum. Who a mother was. Someone who was kind and wise, someone gentle, nurturing, someone who knows how to give good hugs and kisses, someone who knows how to love, and someone for Possum to love back. The next day, Possum saw another possum. Well, it had 4 legs and a long tail, but none were pink, but it was an awful lot taller than Possum, so Possum approached it and said, "You have 4 legs." "I do," said the creature. "And 4 paws," said Possum. "I do," said the creature. Possum looked up at the creature. Are you a possum like me?" "No," the creature said, and then licked Possum's head. "I am a dog." "Oh," Possum said, "so not a possum." "Why so glum?" The possum tilted its head. "I want a mother. I'm all alone in this shoebox. I'd sure like a mother to play with, to learn with, to laugh with, to cry with, to grow with, to be with." "I see," said the dog, looking at the possum carefully. The dog sniffed and sniffed Possum, its wet nose cold. "Well, like me, you have 4 paws. and a long tail. And then Dog placed its head against Possum's chest. And most importantly, you have a heart that beats like mine. I've been looking for someone to play with, to learn with, to laugh with, to cry with, to take care of, to be with, to love with. But you are not a possum, and I am not a dog, said Possum. Motherhood, said Dog, isn't about who you are, but who you choose to be, my dear Possum. Now, pack up that shoebox. It's time to go home. Dog and Possum left together, mother and daughter, into the sunset.
Careful the things you say, children will listen. Careful the things you do, children will see and learn. Children may not obey, but children will listen. Children will look to you for which way to turn, to learn what to be. Careful before you say, listen to me. Children will listen.
Careful the wish you make. Wishes are children. Careful the path they take. Wishes come true. Not free. Careful the spell you cast, not just on children. Sometimes the spell may last past what you can see and turn against you.
Careful the tale you tell, that is the spell. Children will listen.
We now enter the time in our service that we make for our hearts and our spirits, for our cares for one another and our memories of one another and those we love. What I'd like to do today is to invite you to participate in a classic Mother's Day tradition. When I grew up in the South, as well as I've heard in many other parts of the country, we wore carnations on Mother's Day. A red carnation if our mother was living, if our mother or mothers were living, or a white carnation for a mother who was deceased. And we know that it can be varied, those who mother us and those that we hold in our hearts who have parented us. So what I'd like to invite you to do today is to share in the comments one white carnation, two white carnations, one red carnation, two red carnations, three red carnations, one white, one red carnation, whatever the reality is for you. I invite you to share for your mother or mothers or someone's who have parented you that you're holding specially today. I invite you to share what carnation or carnations you would be wearing in honor or memory of them. I invite you now to join with me in the spirit of prayer or meditation. In religious community, we share our joys and our triumphs, our sorrows and our broken places. In this circle of care, we make space for the complexity in our lives, the myriad experiences that bless and break our hearts. The truth of human experience dictates that on any given day, we each come to the table with our hearts in different places. It can be especially so on certain days, as is on this day, invented to honor women who nurture. In this circle of care, we honor the truth that mothering is not and never will be quantified in one single descriptor. Mothering can be elusive or infuriating, fulfilling or confusing, commonplace or triumphant. It exists in the everyday experiences of each person. There is no human being that is not connected to or disconnected from a mother or someone who has mothered them. And so we honor the complexity of experience, writ large in flowered platitudes, but here in the space that we craft and we create, laid bare, honoring the truth in each of our hearts. There is room for all in this circle. If you have carried a child or children, whether or not they came to be born, we see you. If you have fervently wished to do so and the circumstances of fate made it impossible, we see you. If you love children we cannot see, whether because of death or estrangement, we see you. If you never wanted to be a mother, we see you. If you were happy to mother other people's children as an educator, an aunt, an auntie, or a foster parent, we see you. If your mother hurt you physically or emotionally in some way, we see you. If you had no mother, no one you would call a mother, we see you. If your mother is or was your best friend, we see you. If your gender says you are not a mother and yet you take on the role of nurturer, we see you. If you wonder whether your mothering has been enough, oh dear heart, we see you. And if yours is a different truth altogether, we hold and honor and cherish your unspoken story. There is room for all in this circle. May it be so today and always.
Sleep, my child, and peace attend you all through the night. I who love you shall be near you all through the night. Soft the drowsy hours are creeping, near and pale in slumber sleeping. I, my loving vigil, day revealing breeze of pure and holy feeling all through the night.
Years ago, my wife and I were discussing personalities, gender roles, and for those of you who don't know us that well, I am the domestic one in this relationship. But Andrea very clearly and definitively stated to me, I will never be my mother. I got to thinking and I realized, oh my God, I'm my mother. I'm a little passive aggressive, but thankfully, Andrea's tone deafness has done a pretty good job of breaking me of that habit. When I come home and throw out a snarky, thanks for unloading the dishwasher, usually it's met with a surprise, oh, you're welcome. It's just not quite the same. If I'm not careful, I can get a little too competitive when it comes and emotionally invested when it comes to board games. I think I can count on the number of times I played a board game with my mother on 2 fingers. I definitely inherited my mother's addiction to the sweet, sweet nectar of the gods that is Diet Coke. Every morning on the way to school growing up, it was my job to make sure to grab a Diet Coke for my mom and wait until we were off all the bumpy roads and onto the freeway before I opened. I even had a special tool in the car to open the can. It was a big responsibility, and I got to have the first sip. And of course, I am also a 4th generation recipient of our family's shared trauma. Okay, this is going to sound silly, and it sort of is, but this is real. If you are cleaning dishes at our house and you stack dirty plates, I will friggin' lose it. My parents will friggin' lose it. My sibling will lose it. We go nuts because if you stack the plates, you have to clean both sides. I'm pretty sure plates have been broken from us yelling, "Don't stack the plates!" at our poor unsuspecting guests. Friends like to torment me by stacking paper plates in front of me when they come over for a barbecue. Hey, Bill, look what I'm doing. I'm stacking the plates. I'm just like, you're lucky those are paper plates. Otherwise, you would be doing the dishes or I would be throwing you out of my house. And they're just like, oh my God, Bill, what's wrong with you? I'm like, stacking plates. Anyway, I've been asked to help out doing dishes at church at events, and I'm just like, nope, can't do it. It's because if I try washing plates at church, it's going to be like Andrea trying to vacuum. There's not going to be a lot of vacuuming and a whole lot of cursing. Hi, my name is Bill, and I'm my mother. So here are a few truths that I've learned from my mother over the years. There is no such thing as too much garlic. 3 cloves, giant spoonful. 6 cloves, 2 giant spoonfuls. Yeah, no such thing as too much garlic. White wine should never, ever be served without an equal amount of ice in the glass. Andrea usually face palms when we're out at a super fancy restaurant, and I asked the sommelier for a second glass for wine filled with ice. Yeah, I've done some fun stuff with red wine too, but that's another story. And we must have a plan. The plan can be deviated from. It can be altered. It can be changed. But we must have a plan. Don't get me wrong. I can be spontaneous, but it has to be planned. Like, hey, next Thursday from 4 to 7, we're going to be spontaneous. I'm like, I can do that. I can work with that. But there's got to be a plan. Now, and of course, my favorite color is not red. It's red my favorite color. That's the name. Not red, red my favorite color. And I like that one. I grew up in the back of a canyon on the Central Coast. I loved it. Very rural on a ranch. We had a lot of traditions growing up. Barbecues, wine bottling parties. Those were so much fun. 4th of July parties and parades, canyon night where dozens of neighbors came over once a week to make sure they built community and they weren't isolated. Every Tuesday night they'd come over and it was so much fun. And of course, picnics. My mother is the queen of picnics, which makes me the prince of picnics. So, I mean, like, hey, that's pretty cool. But what all these community building events have in common is food. So when I was 12, my mother underwent surgery and was unable to cook Thanksgiving that year. So I offered to cook. I had a little chef's hat with geckos. It was very cute. So she and my grandmother, whose cooking skills were legendary, not in a good way, sat at the kitchen table drinking mimosas while my mother walked me through step by step all of the processes to make Thanksgiving dinner. And I did it. It turned out great. And I have loved cooking ever since. Cooking is my passion. Cooking is my outlet. I love to cook for other people, to do events, dinner parties. I love doing that. I love teaching kids how to cook. And I got that from my mom. My dad gave me a love of power tools, but that's not why we're here today. Maybe another time. But when it comes down to it, my mother is the one who taught me how to build community. And it starts at the kitchen table. Hi, my name is Bill, and I am my mother.
I'd like to start today with a reading by Katie Lee Crane. The month of May means Mother's Day has come. I'm going to have to trust Hallmark and daddies, 6-year-old kids, and grown-up kids who are moms themselves to honor the many mothers among us that may or may not fit the so-called typical picture as they deserve to be honored, brass bands, flags flying, breakfast in bed, and the kitchen's cleaned up afterwards. I wish for those mothers a memorable day full of love and laughter. Sadly, she says, I don't trust Hallmark to remember the feelings of women who don't fit Mother's Day in quite the same way. There are no cards on the rack for the women who gave children up for adoption, maybe never to see them again. No cards for the women who faced painful and difficult choices during a pregnancy. No cards for the women who desperately would have wanted to conceive and bear children, but could not. No cards for women who have lost children of any age, or for the women whose children have abandoned them in anger. There is so little consolation for other mothering on a day so full of motherhood and apple pie. Every day when Mother's Day rolls around, I wish there were just a little less hype about the typical versions of motherhood and a little more acknowledgement of the not so traditional mothers and mothering in our midst. People who come in all colors, shapes, sizes, genders, and ages. And more than anything, I wish there were a lot more empathy for those who suffer because mothers are being honored and they don't fit in quite the same wonderful way. Let us honor them all on this day. Women who conceived, women who bore, women who reared, women who lost, women who let go, women who made different choices, and people of any and all genders who mother. Happy day. Mother's Day can be complicated. On the one hand, it may be a happy day of phone calls to mothers, brunches, flowers, breakfasts in bed, and, as our reading reminded us, the kitchens that are cleaned up afterwards. But there are so many other realities too. And as we go about trying to hold all of these in this embracing, compassionate, wide-armed community of ours, it makes it complicated. It might be a day of remembering those who have mothered us but are no longer with us. It might be a day of being reminded of the more complicated relationships and complicated realities with mothers and those who have mothered us. And it may be a day of getting reminded of the often narrow perspective through which Mother's Day and some of these other traditionally holidays, the narrow perspective that they get viewed through, and those who it leaves out. I invite us to remember these complications and to hold wide open hearts for ourselves and others today. So it is trying to hold all of these complications that I come to talk to you about this joyous and chaotic thing called mothering. Now, I love animated movies. I always have. Even as a teenager, when it was definitely not a really cool sort of thing to love. Today, I was particularly reminded of one from a few years ago called Zootopia. Totally worth a watch if you haven't seen it yet. Zootopia. Now, at one level, the movie has a fairly standard plot line for these sorts of movies of growing in self-knowledge, a friendship, you can do anything your mind you put your mind to sort of thing, and of growing up and moving out and having great adventures. Like I said, fairly standard for these sorts of movies these days. But another growing standard for movies these days is the many, many layers that are there in the movie. So on a different level, it is also a movie about the challenges of parenthood. Now, the main character is a rabbit named Judy Hopps, who grew up on a carrot farm. She's a rabbit, of course, she grew up on a carrot farm with her parents and her 200 some odd brothers and sisters in a town called Bunnyborough. As the story goes, in Zootopia, animals once acted like animals do today, but evolved so that they could walk around on two legs, talk, and choose to not eat one another anymore. Thus, the motto of Zootopia is, anyone can be anything. Well, taking this to heart, the hero of the story, Judy, the carrot farmer, decides to be the first ever rabbit police officer. Now, aside from her eventual chief, the animals least excited about this idea of hers are her parents. They keep trying to talk Judy out of it, but you can tell it's only half-hearted. They really do care about their daughter, but they worry about her, and also they bless and release her as she goes on to the capital city. They're annoying as they keep calling her to see how she is, calling her every day to tell her that they love her. And when she comes back after failing at part of the quest that the movie's about, they welcome her with open arms and without too many questions. As they're setting her off for the train, they say something that I think is rather emblematic of parenting. On the one hand, they say how proud they are of her, and on the other, how terrified they are for her. Her dad calls it a proud-scared combo. A proud-scared combo. Any of y'all ever experienced that one? A proud-scared combo? I sure have. Quite a bit as a mother, in fact. In many ways, parenting is a spiritual adventure in dichotomies, an adventure in contrasts. Judy's parents' proud-scared combo, a hope and fear combo, the attachment and letting go combo. My official journey as a parent started out a bit unexpectedly. My daughter decided, at least as I tell the story, my daughter decided that she needed to come more than 2 weeks before her due date, so outside the norm, because she had gotten it through her mind that she just had to be born on Mother's Day. No fooling, on Mother's Day. And she made sure it was good and early in the morning, like before 4 a.m., but still on Mother's Day, so I could enjoy as much of Mother's Day as possible as a new mother. Adorable, isn't it? The downside of it is that her birthday often coincides with Mother's Day, so it ends up superseding it on a regular basis. And by the way, this year that includes today. A theme of contrasts I find myself experiencing again and again is that of chaos and joy. Sometimes I think our youngest ones have got the joy figured out in a way that the rest of us have largely forgotten. I remember days upon days spent with her being excited about nothing but how awesome and cool the color yellow was. Or a book that she found joy in hearing over and over and over and over again. A walk down the block and back that takes nearly an hour because of the curiosity and excitement about every bug and every blade of grass that we walked past. One of my favorites was on the first trip to a new zoo that we hadn't seen before. One of the first exhibits we walked by, or at least tried to walk by, was the leopards. She was instantly captivated and didn't want to go any further, and instead just stood there gazing at these rather boring sleeping leopards for an hour and a half. I appreciated her joy and stepped on my own impatience, and also then stepped back and recognized the same impatience in many of the other adults who were trying to drag their small ones away from the leopards to be able to see the next thing. Apparently, my daughter wasn't the only one who liked them and found joy in just staring at them. Now, it wasn't just the joy my daughter experienced, and I experienced vicariously through her. I also felt tons of joy watching her grow and experiencing things and learning. Getting to see her learn to walk. By the way, 19 and a half months is way later than normal, but she had to do it on her own time. Talk about a combination of worry and joy at the same time. Teaching her how to read and then seeing her independently read her first word. And also appreciating the utter irony of the first word that my daughter read. At the time, I was a longtime vegetarian and raising her as largely vegetarian. And the irony that the first word that my kid read was ham. Not chicken, not fish, not broccoli, ham. And then the joy of seeing her start to become her own defined person. So I'd like to share this piece by author Barbara Kingsolver about the chaos of parenting. Okay, and some joy mixed in there also. So here's what she says. I have a child who was born with the gift of focus, inclined to excel at whatever she earnestly pursued. Soon after her second birthday, a time period most parents know quite well, she shot straight through to the ranks of a world-class dawdler. I thought it might be my death. Like any working mother, keeping the family presentable and solvent, I lived in a flat-out rush. My daughter, on the other hand, lived in Zen time. These doctrines do not find peace under one roof. I tried everything I could to bring her onto my schedule. 5-minute countdowns, patient explanations of our planned itinerary, frantic appeals, authoritarianism, the threat of taking her to preschool exactly how she was dressed when the clock hit 7. She went in PJs, much to her delight. The more I tried to hurry us along, Kingsolver says, the more meticulously unhurried her movements became. My brother pointed out that this is how members of the Japanese parliament carry out a filibuster, by shuffling up to the voting box so extremely slowly, it can take one person an hour to get across the room, and a month or two to get a whole vote in. It's called cow walking, he reported. Perfect, I said. At my house, we're having a cow life. And that's how it was as I sat at breakfast one morning, watching my darling idle dangerously over her breakfast. I took a spectacularly deep breath and said in a voice I imagined was calm, "We need to be going very soon. Please be careful not to spill your orange juice." She looked me in the eye and coolly knocked over her glass. Bang. Command dead. Socks, shifts, overalls would have to be changed. And the start of my workday set back another 30 minutes, 35 if she wanted me to show her the you-know-who's boss by enforcing the 5-minute timeout. She knew what she was doing. She was performing a filibuster. I'd been warned the day would dawn when my sweet daughter would become a terrible two. And this still entirely predictable thing broadsided me, because in the beginning she was mine. As much a part of my body, literally, as my own arms and legs. The milk I drank knit her bones in place. Her hiccups jarred me awake at night. Children come to us as a dramatic coup of the body's fine inner will. The process of sorting out self from others so gradual as to be invisible to a mother's naked soul. In our own hearts, we don't expect one of our own limbs to stand up one day and announce its own agenda. Beautiful, isn't it? And as Barbara Kingsolver talks about this is perhaps one of the more difficult parts of parenting. And that goes for parenting in its many, many forms, including coaching and mentoring, advising and guiding, thinking that they are ours, that we can indeed shape them and mold them, see ourselves in them, but then watching as they become their own selves or more themselves, and watching as they begin to chart their own way, whether or not it matches what we have in mind for them or not. And whether we have warned them about it or not, watching them head fully into that which we may have warned them. And of course, there's the often bumpy road that so often happens as we get there, as we heard in Kingsolver's story. The terrible twos, which don't just happen when kids are 2 years old. It's a much longer period of time than that, truly. The start of kindergarten, the first day of kindergarten, the elementary school, then middle school, the onset of teenage years, then the start of high school. I heard a middle school counselor say that early teenagers are really just toddlers in giant bodies. I think she's onto something. Did I mention the teenage years? And their teenage years are often difficult too, as they start to really form their own identities, their own paths, and cope with all of these brand new raging hormones. When folks go through gender transitions, those first few years on new balances of hormones can be rocky too, often simulating some of the teenage years all over again. Young adult years aren't necessarily any easier. That's when I finally could really and truly move farther away from my family and make my own decisions about when to come back and visit. The chaos of these transitions wasn't easy on my mom either, and she had to cope with the changes too. Chaos, uncertainty, unknowns around every corner. And the clashing of the fast-paced, well-organized life, or at least the life that we in the days we may have imagined, with what Kingsolver calls cow life. Now, her story that I told you wasn't quite done yet, so let me tell you the end part. Later in the day, she says, I called a friend to tell my breakfast and orange juice war story. She had a 6-year-old, so I expected commiseration. The point of my call really was to hear that one could live through this and that it ended. Instead, my friend was quiet. You know, she said finally, I never went through that. I worry about her. She works so hard to please everybody. I'm afraid she'll never know how to please herself. A landmine exploded in the back of my conscience, says Kingsolver. My child was in the process of becoming all I'd ever wanted. That's where the chaos and joy come together. For instance, when one can see the things that are driving you the most nuts are actually these big things you've been hoping for. It's part of what I define as successful parenting, and in fact, successful mentoring too. That if you are successful, you are working yourself out of a job. But this success may take more of living with the chaos and uncertainty than many of us, including myself, would really like. And then there is the letting go part of it. I've found that when I've mentored, that I have felt both the attachment to being the guide and to being needed, along with the joy of seeing them not need me anymore. When I had an intern minister, I loved watching him grow in his preaching from uncertainty, listening to my critique. It felt so good to be needed and wanted. And then growing and growing and growing, and then without my guidance, ultimately moving on and stepping into his own. And I've watched that with my daughter too. Watched And occasionally she says that golden line that I want to frame every time she says it. There's only a few times. Hey, Mom, you were right. Isn't that a fabulous phrase? But more often, I see her growing where she'll rely on me, but then she doesn't need to rely on me. And I see her making her steps forward and her choices on her own. Barbara Kingsolver shared some thoughts on parenting teenagers as well from her experience of her cow-poking daughter growing up. First, she notes a study that demonstrated scientifically a decline in the psychological well-being of parents who had teenagers. Okay, not groundbreaking, but perhaps this is a bit of consolation that teenagers, not just toddlers, but teenagers do indeed drive their parents and guardians crazy, and that we aren't alone if we feel we're going crazy as a result of them. The study also shows that the parent's greatest chance of survival lies in having meaningful work and such outside of family responsibilities. Maybe this brings us a bit of hope. Here's what she says. The best defense against a teenager's independence, probably a toddler's as well, is simply a matter of quitting before we're fired. We're not quitting exactly, but backing off from eminent domain, happily and with dignity, expressing ourselves in the various pursuits and pleasures that we may hold apart from parenting. Individuation goes both ways. We may feel less driven to shape a child in our own image if instead we can shape policy or shape sheet metal, teach school, or boss around an employee or two. Luckiest of all, Barbara Kingsolver says, is the novelist. I get to invent people who will live or die on the page and do exactly what I wish because I said so. Kind of makes you want to go write novels, doesn't it? Yes, novelists are lucky indeed. Although I've learned even from my own Dungeons and Dragons playing that the characters that I create, and I am the one playing them and commanding them around, often take on a life of their own and find ways to surprise me. Now today, I've talked a lot about motherhood and parenthood, and not everyone in the room is parenting younger folks right now, although some of us are. On Mother's Day, on Father's Day too, I hope we can take a wider look at mothering, at fathering, at parenting, at mentoring, at nurturing in all of their many forms. Sometimes it means being a biological parent with one generational difference, sometimes more generational differences. Sometimes it's caring for folks with whom we are connected in other ways. Given all of this variety, I hope that the stories and thoughts that we've shared about mothering and parenting hold truths and metaphors, so perhaps each of us can take something from this. Whether we mother or are mothered, or both, whether we guide others, are guided, care for people or activities or things going on both big and small, in all of these things, there is both chaos and there is joy. May we find and relish the joy wherever we can, and may we embrace the chaos and the lessons that it brings for us. May it be so.
As we commit together to making this a loving community, we take time to remember that UUCB needs our gifts and support. We invite you now to make an offering. Each week, half our offering is shared with a good neighbor organization who needs our financial support. And we hope that you will continue to practice generosity with them during this difficult time. This month, our good neighbor is the Berkeley Food Pantry. The mission of the Berkeley Food Pantry is to provide families, especially those with children, with adequate sustenance and nutrition at times when bills for food, rent, and health care and other items are sometimes overwhelming. Offerings of any value are received with gratitude. Details on how to give electronically will appear on your screen as our offertory begins. Thank you. Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate this offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service. And now a few announcements. On Saturday, May 22nd, Chalice Circles are hosting a pop-up food drive from 9 to 2 for the Berkeley Food Pantry in the church RE parking lot. You can drop off food or checks. See the week ahead for more details. On Sunday, May 23rd at 12:15, we have our May congregational meeting on Zoom. Next year's budget and Schweitzer Award presentations to Lonnie Mosley and Larry Nagel are meeting highlights. And on Sunday, June 6th at 11 a.m., mark your calendars for a special in-person outdoor flower communion worship service in our main parking lot. Worship will also be streamed on YouTube and Facebook Live concurrently. Please note this is a special one-time in-person service. Now, please join us in singing our final song. The words will be on your screen.
I know this rose will open, I know my fear will burn away, I know my soul will unfurl its wings, I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open.
I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose, I know
this rose will open.
We know this rose will open. Someday it will open, even if it's not exactly when we hope it might. We know our fear will burn away. Someday, even if it's not exactly when we hope it might. We know it will, though. We know our souls will open like the roses, unfurling their wings and taking flight. We know they will, someday. Sooner, later, it will. Our souls will open. We dream dreams together, sing songs together, and do the work of living and loving together. As you go about your week, may you remember those who accompany you on your journey, and remember those that you accompany as well. Blessed be.
It's been great being together today. In the words of Denise Crowley, we extinguish this chalice, but not the embrace of the divine feminine, nor the fiery goddess bursts in our soul. Our flames burn in our spirit, questioning for equality, equity, and liberation. Happy Mother's Day.